I have the privilege tonight, which is why I'm really standing here, is of introducing you to two very special people. And the more I get to know them, the more special they are. Robert Martinez and Talissa Abeyta. I'll just give you quick bios, and then what we thought we'd do is kind of open it up, more of a kind of a conversation, panel discussion, and then toward the end I'll open it up to you as well to ask questions also. Robert is actually the curator, the artistic curator for Grounded, so he's the one who gathered all those 15 together and pulled them together according to the theme. A celebrated Northern Arapaho artist, born here in Wyoming, the Wind River, a member, of course, of the Northern Arapaho tribe, and his inspiration and creativity very much comes from his native heritage. Much of his current work uses historical imagery and myths and stories of both the West and Arapaho culture, and he combines them, as you'll see, and we're going to actually show as we are talking and answering questions and conversing together. You'll see we'll do a slideshow of both his art and some of Talissa's art as well. He's known very much for his vibrant colors and that stand out, and I think very much that distinguishes Robert, you'll see, in many ways, and highlighting in many ways the kind of contemporary vibrancy of his people. He's the recipient of numerous awards. I would be here all evening if I went through the list. Of course, more recently in 2019, the Wyoming Governor's Art Award, and his work is held in numerous other art institutions such as the Brenton Museum out of Sheridan, the Red Cloud Heritage Museum, the Plains Indian Museum at Cody, and even the Smithsonian National Museum in Washington, D.C. And the thing about Robert, and that I was just first, and I've known Robert now just for maybe a year, but I was really drawn to celebrated artists that are passionate about coming along emerging artists and assisting and kind of facilitating their development. And that's a real gift, investing in the other. And that just drew me immediately to Robert from day one. So Robert, it's great to have you here. Thank you. And then we have Talissa Abeyta. Talissa is a descendant of the Eastern Shoshone. And by the way, I could give you his descent to it. It's very long as well. So I shortened it to Northern Arapaho. But Eastern Shoshone, Northern Arapaho, and others. She was raised in Fort Washakie on the Wind River. Her artwork is defined as Native American aesthetic with contemporary design. And you'll see from the images, and we'll talk a little bit about that, she focuses a lot on ledger art. And we'll talk about that in case you're not familiar with that. Most of you are, I'm sure. She is maybe a little bit quieter than Robert, but she is also the optimal, she's the a tremendous optimist. And she looks at things through the eyes of compassion. And that really shapes in many ways what she does artistically. She is best known to represent the love she has for her own heritage and people, to create art that depicts Native Americans in beauty, grace, resilience, and strength. And I love this. This is in her standard bio. She aspires to reconcile, heal, and enlighten throughout her life's work. Welcome. It's good to have you here. Now, all right, so I'm going to sit down now. Okay, I think you can see me in many ways. I thought what I'd do at the beginning a little bit is just to kind of get a sense of who they are and their own background, is giving us a little sense of when you kind of knew, and I'll ask Robert first, you were going to be an artist, and what kind of shaped you toward thinking that way? Your calling.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming, everybody. We sure appreciate you showing up and wanting to know a little bit about us and our process and what we do. So thank you. Thanks, and thanks for the Lander Art Center for hosting us. Sure appreciate that. And big shout out to Paul for organizing everything and getting us together. And now for my answer. It's been a long time. I mean, I've always been a creative person. I always say, because I get this question a lot, that when I was a kid, I used to get in trouble for writing on the walls with crayons, right? And then when I got older, I got in trouble for spray painting on the wall. I've always been creative. I've always liked creating things. But it was somewhere in my early teens or maybe pre-teens, and for the life of me, I cannot remember who said this to me. I can't remember if it was a priest or if it was one of my elders or if it was family. But somebody told me that if you have a talent, God gives you a talent, that it's a sin if you don't use it. And that always stuck with me. So I just always stuck with creating things and drawing things. My mother was a respected beadworker. My uncles they did paintings and drawings. A lot of people that I knew from the reservation are creative and they make things. So that was always, easy to do. But it wasn't until high school when I had some really good teachers that looked out for me and supported me, even when I didn't want to be supported, that I found out that, hey, maybe you could be an artist. Maybe this is an actual thing. Because at the time, I didn't know any professional. I've never seen any professional artists. I didn't know of anybody, hear about it. Certainly not from my backyard here in the Wind River Reservation or in Riverton. I didn't know any. So it was right about then. My senior year art teacher, his name is Brendan Weaver. You might know the name from Maven up here. Yeah, he was my senior year art teacher. He challenged me. We butted heads quite a bit because I was a senior, right? I was the man on campus art-wise, right? But he challenged me quite a bit my senior year. And then unbeknownst to me, he and the other art teacher, Nancy Gray, put me up for art scholarships. So I won a full ride to UW, Savannah Art College, Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, and CBC. So I decided to go to Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, which is in Denver. That's about as far as I wanted to go. I wanted to go, right? That I was comfortable with, so we settled in there. I graduated at 19. I went there at 17. Graduated at 19 as the youngest Native person to graduate at the time. I don't know if that's still a record, but it was then. And then I've been creating professionally ever since.
Great. Talissa. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention about Talissa is if you have not seen her, you've already seen her work. If you live here in Lander, I have a feeling you're going to be very loud, Talissa. And, but she was very much part of this recent mural that went up on the Lander Bake Shop here. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But Talissa, how did you get interested in art and kind of what led you to becoming an artist?
So I've always created, but I didn't always know that it was my life calling. I cared a lot about what other people thought. So I was all about this impressive title, I guess. And so I was actually studying architectural engineering, and then part of that was a drawing class, and it just pulled down my heartstrings, so I dropped the engineering and decided to pursue art.
Did you find architectural engineering confining?
Yeah,
In
I
what
mean,
sense?
it was similar, and actually in my artistic style, you can kind of see that it's structural.
Interesting, yeah. I remember when I actually thought I would be an architect. So when I was in junior and high school, that was what I wanted to be. Then when I really got into it, I thought, oh my land, you have to know math and you've got to know all these things. And I don't want anything to do with it. So anyway, but thank you. All right, so both of you, as artists, kind of when you think about, and I could answer this myself, what influences my love for art, but what have been the formative kind of influences in your own life in terms of shaping the artist that you are? What do you look to, learn from, and admire?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, let's go, ladies first.
So I would say, I guess the extra push as of recently was my instructor at CWC, Matt Flynn. And then long before that would definitely be my grandma. She taught me how to bead and sew. And so, like, I didn't know that I actually was, designing and composing pieces, but she was probably the main formative.
Interesting. Anyone in the area that you find you're drawn to their work? Besides Robert. I know that.
Obviously, Robert.
Of course. Number one, Robert.
Actually, there's so much natural talent on this reservation. So I guess just in general, I'm very inspired by all artists. I mean, they're amazing and they do a lot of great stuff. I guess it would just be like them to push themselves to get to the next level. But there's a lot of talent.
That's great. Robert.
Well, I said before that, my mother was a well-respected beadworker. She taught me how to bead also. It takes too long for me.
Yeah.
I don't like working that slow. Of course, I wasn't very good either. But I'll echo what Talissa said, is that there's a lot of creative people. I grew up watching people make things. They just made them. My mother never considered herself an artist, quote unquote, but she made some most beautiful things. And, it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I was talking to some older ladies that, that everybody respected. And they told me, your mom is one of the best beadworkers we have on our reservation. I never knew that. I had just grown up around that. I just figured everybody beaded that way. But there are awesome painters in the area, sculptors, carvers, traditional craftspeople, quilters. Oh, I can't forget them. That do great work. And I agree with Talissa. I wish that we could see more of those. Well, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I am really inspired these days by all of my contemporaries, my colleagues, Talissa being one of them, all of the people that you see at the Pioneer Museum. Every time I see them, and I know all of them, every time I see them at different shows, what are you working on? What's your latest thing? And they'll show me, and I'm like, wow. And immediately that makes me want to get back to my studio and get working, and just to see what I can do, and it's also an evolution too. You have to look at your old stuff and say, well, I already kind of did that. Let's see if I can find something. That's a good inspiration. Let me just try to tweak this here, or do a little bit better here, or something like that. So challenging myself is a big reason just to keep trying, keep going, keep trying new stuff. I think that's all.
I was going to ask you now a little bit about your art and kind of some of its distinctives. And I'll start with Robert, but I have one of Robert's pieces in my office. And every time I'm on Zoom, without exception, because it's so vibrant, everybody says, what is that on your wall behind you? All right. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about how that came to be, that whole medium that you're using.
Sure.
And why? Why so bright?
Well, if you don't know, they're airbrushed acrylic underpainting, which I do with if you've ever seen them, they're just a little tiny paint gun about the size of a pen. And I do a acrylic underpainting in fairly bright colors, but then I go over it with translucent oil glazes so you can see through them. They catch the light. So that's two mediums and they're mixed. That's an old medium oil paint and a new medium airbrush acrylic. So you'll find that I do that with not only themes, but also with technique and materials that I mix, the past and the present. But I used to paint just straight oil, and I used to paint very realistically. That's my BFAs in painting and drawing. And I love to paint people because I love to listen to their stories. I love to hear about people, their individual lives, what happened to them. But I noticed that when somebody says Native Americans or indigenous people of America, you usually get two images in their head. One is either black and white or the other one's sepia, those old photographs. That's immediately what comes to mind. And when you think of those type of images, you think of the people that are not around anymore, but we are. So in direct opposition to that, I paint specifically in those bright, vibrant colors that are alive, that have strength, that have just an energy to specifically state that no, we're not gone, we're not dead, we're not a dead culture, we're here, we're alive, we're right next to you, and I don't want you to miss us. And if you've ever seen one of my paintings, you can't miss them. You can't miss them. But that's the whole reason for the colors.
That's why for the first show, which is the Pioneer Museum, we used one of his pieces as the poster. I don't think we have it here, because we knew no one's going to miss it. Okay? And as well, it will draw attention, Talissa, you, and we haven't put up her art yet, it will go up afterwards, I know, and you'll see, but she focuses a lot on ledger art, right? Can you tell us a little bit about why and a little bit about that medium?
So it's more like paying my respects to the origins of ledger art. So ledger art was something that it was during the reservation era, and they were running out of the buffalo hides and the materials that they would usually use. So there was discarded ledger paper, and I fell in love with the idea that it was so resourceful and that they were nothing was going to stop their stories from being told. Because that's what, if you see a traditional ledger piece, it's more figurative, and it was for the purpose of telling the story. And versus mine, it's more modern imagery on ledger, but it's more paying my respects to the origins of where ledger art started. And my idea is that the resilience behind it, I just love everything about ledger art. So.
Can I ask a practical question? Because every time someone looks at and sees the ledger art that's in the show, I often hear them say, and not every time, but often, where are they getting all that ancient paper?
And mine is actually from Etsy. So.
The truth comes out. Okay.
I am hoping to get Wyoming ledger.
Okay, that's great. No, I was curious too.
Yeah.
Exactly. You do some ledger work too, a good bit.
I do, and thanks Talissa for giving that great overview of the history of ledger paper. Originally, it's specific to Plains tribes. And originally it was just a warrior art, but now we have great women ledger artists like Talissa. And interestingly, there are only a few who do a realistic style, like Talissa's, mine. There's Dylan Cabin, Chris Pappin. There's only a few of them, and there's two right here. You'll see some other great ledger artists. So there's Jean Pépion, there's Joanne Bennett too. But the original ledger art and many of the contemporary art disregards the background. So they'll take an antique piece of paper from bank general store, things like that. And I do that too, and disregard the background and paint and draw over that. But to evolve that and take that tradition onto a new place, I have used specific maps or other specific antique documents and paper just to give whatever art piece I'm working on another dimension, you know. And it allows me to flex my creative muscles in a little bit different way. And if you've been looking at the imagery, it blends a lot of themes of past and present there. And I don't have to use those crazy colors. In fact, I only limit it to 2 because everybody else does colorful ledgers, so it's got to be different.
I'll come back to you on this, and it's going to lead into some other really more in-depth discussion really about the issues right now within both Native American culture and especially with artists. But Robert, you're founding member of the Creative Indigenous Collective, and then of course the Northern Arapaho Artists Society. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll get behind it a little bit.
Sure. What I was, trying to, everybody knows that Lantern and Riverton are like the center of the art world, right? Exactly. So when I, tried to be a young emerging artist here in this area, I was like, after I sold my first 15 to everybody I knew, then I was in a seller's wasteland. There was nobody else. So I learned pretty quickly that I had to go out of state. And I still sell most of my artwork out of state. But because of that, it's rack in my brain and venting to other artists here in the area. Like, there's nothing here. There's nothing here, especially for Native artists. So myself, Bruce Cook, Eugene Ridgebear Jr., and Ron Howard created the Northern Arapaho Artists Society in 2012 just to use our personal networks to find and create new venues for Arapaho artists in the area. Since 2012, we've had up to 2, at least 1, but usually 2 exhibits a year in and around Wyoming. And we just opened one in Boulder, Colorado, called Homelands in September. So we're branching out to the area. So that's been able to leverage the visibility of Native artists in Wyoming. The Creative Indigenous Collective is made up of Ben Peace, John Pepion, Lewis, and Gina Still Smoking, Lauren Monroe, and Holly Young. And we're regional throughout Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. And we have done the same thing. We're trying to raise the visibility and create more opportunities for Native artists in the region. And since 2014, we've had 1 or 2, at least 2 exhibits each year trying to raise visibility and leverage that visibility into more opportunities for other artists. Because of that visibility, because of the press generated, all of that, I have met folks like this man right next to me.
Paul-Gordon is my name.
We created this exhibit, which is going to tour over the world. So this, it's a grassroots group way of thinking to raise visibility and create more opportunities for Native artists. Whereas before 2012, can anybody think of any?
Interesting. You mean in the area here?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
Now,
I think
now,
there's more though. I've only lived here 3 years,
Yeah.
but there was an exhibit on ledger art at the museum a couple of years ago.
the fake one, yeah.
The fake one? Okay. Well, see what I know. And the show that the Art Center does every year on Indigenous art.
Yeah, you know who started that show?
You.
We did. We asked the Lander Art Center, can
Yeah.
we have an annual show? So that's that whole creating opportunities.
And I think it really creates awareness.
Yeah, we hope
that,
so.
for people like me that had
Sure.
no idea there was so much creativity.
There's not a lot of opportunity in Wyoming, but we've been able to at least get some visibility, and it's been a slow growth, but it is growing.
So I want to play off a little bit of something you told me earlier and what Talissa just kind of referred to when I was asking you, Talissa, about how you got interested in art and kind of that calling, that sense of calling. And then you led into talking about how there are a lot of other artists, and you said, I just want them to get out there. Okay? So, and Robert, once when we were sitting down, we were talking, as we were going through the list of potential participants, in this exhibit, you were mentioning that there's some real talent, but there's almost a fear of sometimes success. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that and some background to that.
Yeah.
Talissa.
So I said that mostly because, I just now started selling my artwork in 2019, and I took my first art class in 2018. So, and in that small time frame, I just seen a lot of right out of high school students, and it was just the idea of being criticized, I guess. They didn't last more than maybe 2 weeks tops.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's really unfortunate because super talented, and it would be awesome to have more representation.
And criticized by?
I guess just, and it's constructive criticism, but they didn't really take it that way, I guess. And so they would be a little bit hard on themselves, and they just be like, okay, well, I can't do this. So, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Where were you? Can you describe that situation a little bit in more depth?
CWC.
Okay, I didn't hear you say that.
Oh,
Okay, so there were a group of high school students that started in the program. Is that what you're saying?
I started with, and I kind of felt out of place because I'm this 28-year-old coming in, and I felt so late in the game, and I didn't know if I would be accepted and everything. But I gave a lot of respect to the younger artists because they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they knew who they were and what, their place, I guess. And so it's just kind of heartbreaking to see that they didn't think past that. It was just, but that was at CLBC.
Thank you. Robert.
Well, there's a, in my opinion, it's, I don't know, that there's a few different issues or things or hurdles to overcome. Take, for example, the Southwestern tribes. Those people have been making art an economy for, over 100 years now, with non-native people. The silver work, their weaving, their pottery, their sculpture down there. So they have grown up learning the business. Us up here in the Plains region, we didn't grow up with that. We didn't grow up, going and selling our stuff every week as an economy for an income. So there's a lack of knowledge and just general business practices, and through a place called First Peoples Fund, I've helped to put on workshops for that, for emerging artists. So there is that. There is also the knowledge of the kind of the art game, as it were. You have some deadlines. Artists are crazy as it is, but we're all kind of deadlines are not a high on our priority. We're kind of like we'll get to it. But to be a professional artist, you can't be that way. So there's that level of quote unquote professionalism that it's hard for people. And then I think there is a general just not knowing, what do I do? I sold 3 pieces in Riverton. Now I haven't seen or sold any in a month. What do I do now? Well, you got to go outside Riverton. You got to go outside Wyoming, to make any kind of money, and you have to be able to budget that money. So there are all these hurdles, and then, you got to figure out, well, that takes time away from my family. That takes time away from being around here to go into ceremonies or powwows or things that you're used to doing. And that is uncomfortable. And I think for many Native people, anything that makes us uncomfortable is a huge hurdle, even if it's not that bad. We're so used to being in our little circles that we get. We go over here for birthday parties, we go over here for powwow, and we go to basketball games, but anything out of that it's uncomfortable, we tend to shy away from. So there's a lot of our culture that can get in the way, but Talissa is a great example. I hope I have provided some kind of example that you can if you want to, but you do have to make an effort. And for Native artists in this area, it is probably more of an effort than it needs to be. Or should be, I'll put it that way, should be. It shouldn't be this hard, but it is, and that's the reality.
Can you talk a little bit more about why?
How many pieces of Native art do you own?
Some?
She's a good example.
How many?
You're very open-minded here.
How many Native artists do you know? That's why.
Well,
Because
what,
people
let me
aren't
just-
saying, well, we need to buy Native art around here. Also, art in this area is generally not valued enough to make a good living at. People will buy a $2,000 welded bumper because they see the value in that. But to buy a $5,000 painting that's only one of a kind, there's never going to be one, and they don't see the value of that always. So that's not just you. I mean, that's just the region. We're very practical kind of people here in central Wyoming, right? We see the value in some things. Other things we're like, But for an artist, if it's, that's a whole 3 months of wages for us. We can't bank on that in Lander or Riverton or central Wyoming, but you can bank on that in Santa Fe. You can bank on that in places in Montana. If you're from here, you can't bank on it in Jackson, but other people do.
We're trying to change that though.
Right. So that's the main thing. It's just that there's not a good enough art economy here locally.
So I want to play off of that, okay? Because when I was working with Arab artists in the Middle East, often they found themselves kind of being pigeonholed as to being Arab artist, as opposed to artists who were Arab. And so it kind of limited their scope, and their reach. Love to know your kind of, both of you, thinking a little bit about that, as opposed to that you're a native artist, but you're really an artist who's native, so I'll let you go first.
I would mostly label myself as an artist first. I love to create and I love to express myself. So when it comes to, I never really wanted to be boxed in. And because that limits, and it's almost like telling somebody how to think, almost. And I would never tell somebody how to think. So I express myself through my artwork, and it's inspired by my culture, but it's important to me. So I do put a lot of important things into my artwork.
From your culture.
From my culture, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Robert.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Talissa said. I would love to be, I paint and draw mostly people. I would love to be just called a portrait artist or artist that does people. But because I happen to mostly, not always, paint or draw native people, I'm a native artist, right? My artwork was automatically put on this one shelf, right? So I get invited to tons of native art shows. I've only ever been invited to one portrait art show, ever. In 25 years of being a professional artist. And that's only because the people that I happen to paint or draw are native people, usually, you know. Now, I would like you to listen when I say this really, really well, because a non-native artist who paints or draws native imagery will have a longer and more lucrative career than an actual native artist.
And it's become very trendy to replicate that, especially our Western artists. And I've seen a lot of it actually in Fremont County, which is not funny, but pay
Right,
attention to what you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, as a collector, please do your research. But yeah, if you go to Red Lodge, go to Jackson, go to even in Cody, there's some lots of non-native artists making a lot of money that we're not making, but we're the actual native artists, you know. And that's not just for Talissa and I. That's for all 15 of those people over there. There are only a handful that I know of, and I don't know everybody and every native artist out there, but that I know that are making the big dollars that you know a lot of talented people should be that are actually native. Kevin Red Star, Tony Abeyta, Hiram Joe. There's 2 or 3 others, but I can't think of the names right off the bat. But it's a sad fact that still happens. And that's not her and I's fault. That's the people who buy that stuff.
Well, we were talking about how Jackson, you had a lot, but there really wasn't anything from a native artist. You know?
Right, so I went up there about a month ago. I had a meeting up there trying to get more native art stuff going. And I did the gallery tour and I looked around and there was only 2 native artist names that I recognized. And that art was actually resold. A collector had bought them and was reselling them. So the actual artist isn't gonna make any money off of those sales. Everything else was from people that I didn't know. And the native art crowd is fairly small. So, I mean, when I say I didn't know them, if I don't know them, they're probably either very, very emerging or from someplace that we really don't know, like tip of Florida, maybe, I don't know. But usually you kind of see about the same 70, 80 people, you know, if you go to art shows and art markets around the nation. And so we get to kind of know each other. So when I say I didn't recognize them, you know, it's a good chance that they're probably not native.
Yeah, we had at our convention for the Episcopal Church 2 weekends ago, we had Ben Peace, one of the other artists that's participating, one of the 15. And he was talking about how strange it would be if we always said, this is a white artist show. You know, for white artists. I mean, it's unheard of, right? So we have this kind of tendency to kind of categorize so often, right? You know. By the way, this is a little plug. All the art in there is for sale. So there's a price list there. And one of the things that's different than a gallery is that 100% of the sales go to the artist. So we're not taking anything out. And so I'm kind of secretly hoping that some of those works don't sell until we get toward the end of the tour and in the Middle East, because I know many of our Arab sisters and brother collectors will be excited about the tour. But if, just so you know, if you buy it, you can actually get it at the end of the Wyoming tour, which is the end of 2023. And then we'll know ahead, so that artist will do another piece which will go into the tour beyond Wyoming to replace it. So that's how that works. All right, so on the show, why, Robert, did you say yes when you were invited to be the curator? And then, of course, and also participating. And why did you say yes when Robert wrote you to participate in Grounded? I'm just curious. Talissa. You're on.
Sorry, I have like a really light voice, so. I said yes because I thought it was a really awesome experience, and I'm all about experiences. It's exciting to know that this is going to be viewed by so many people. And one of the biggest things that I stand behind is being able to share my culture and where I come from. And that's going to be shared all the way over across the world. So that's why I said yes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for saying yes.
Why did I decide to say yes to becoming the head artist wrangler, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Chasing everybody down.
I don't go so far as curator, just more of a head artist wrangler. Since I've been working with the Creative Indigenous Collective of the Northern Arapaho Artist Society, I've got to meet and work with in tandem some great organizations and people, and I have found that if you put in the work to do that, it pays off more dividends than you would think in the future. I mean, if people like you and like your work, they will ask you back, and they will recommend you to other places, other organizations, other people, and create more avenues for exhibits and, the ability to sell artwork. And I found that is true in my own art career. But I've also found that if you don't give back to other artists, it tends to, I don't know what's the best way to put it, but for me, it doesn't feel as good. I think that's the best way to put it. It just doesn't feel as good. If I can't bring all my friends, then, why have a party, right? For this particular exhibit, I really wanted to show some people from the Northern Plains region and a few from around there that probably don't get as much attention or spotlight as they should, because their artwork is awesome if you've gone over to see the exhibit. There's a couple of emerging folks that I think their art is great, and that's the main thing, is that the art has to be great. And not only is their art great, but all of these people I know give back to their community. Talissa gives back to her community. Recently she did an awesome giant mural here in Lander. Everybody in the show gives back to their community in some way. They teach, they mentor, they do public art projects, they try to get things going in their community. So they're all great people from what I know of them and their artwork. So that's why I asked them to be involved, because I think that more people need to see what they do and learn more about them.
That's great. Just a few more questions, and I'll open it up for a few questions. Just a few more here, then I'll. Curious as to, the point of this exhibition is for us to learn from our Native American sisters and brothers about more responsible living and being interconnected or grounded, if you will, in being more intentional in how we look at the earth and everything that's upon it, which includes, of course, each other and wildlife, and the environment, and all of that. I'm curious as to, on a broader basis, what, as you look out at the world right now, are there a few things that you could say, yeah, that's something the world could really learn from us? That we have something that works well within our tradition and culture that others could really benefit from. We know that, but I'm just curious as to what comes to mind for you, you know? Yeah.
So the balance, whatever we take from Mother Earth, we give back. And so we have that sense of respect. We don't overuse. And so, it's across social media that, they're starting to acknowledge that these were beliefs from Indigenous people across the world. And I don't know, it's just something that was almost like common knowledge, being Native American. So that was probably the first thing that came to mind.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, ditto. That's a great way to put it. There's the whole idea of everything is circular, right? So it always comes back. So if you're starting standing, everything comes back to where you're standing. What are you standing on? You're standing on the earth. What we take, we have to do with respect and honor. And when we go harvest things or when we do ceremonies, we always pay respect in some way to our mother, the earth. And it's something that it seems so basic and so natural and so, you shouldn't have to think about it, but then you just throw a styrofoam cup on. Oh, hey, guess we shouldn't need that. So I think everybody has this understanding. Well, we don't always put it into practice, or maybe we could alter our basic practices of our life to acknowledge just something a little bit so that we help our. Because it's hard. It's not always easy, I sure wish I had a windmill and solar panels and a tiny carbon footprint and my Toyota Tundra that doesn't get very good gas mileage. I have to drive all the way. It was a hybrid, and we didn't have to do any of that, but we have to work towards that. We have to at least open our minds to that. And being in the state of Wyoming, that's kind of hard to do. It's hard to acknowledge the ideas of being close to the earth and doing what we can to help it versus the practicality of driving across, the state of Wyoming in the winter, right? It's hard to justify a $80,000 battery-powered car when I might not get there because we don't have power stations, right? So there's a reality, and then there's our basic understanding. But whatever we can do to get everybody leaning that way, or at least thinking that, or maybe altering our basic daily lives for just a little bit helps, I think. That's one of the things that I was thinking of when I was driving over here for Grounded. But that's also something that all of the older people that I used to listen to their stories, they always had something that related back to, and this is what the earth gave us, this is what the mountains gave us, this is what the lakes gave us, and how we thrived and survived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something interesting, about, when we talk about trying to decolonize, in many ways, our worldviews, it also means getting rid of dualism, right? And so I always find if you listen to a lot of the answers, there's a spirituality that's inherent in the answer because there's no separation between the material and the spiritual, as so often Western culture has done, And so it's kind of very interesting. And I think that's something we have a lot to learn from. That's just natural. It just flows from, And so the last one is a fun question. First of all, how many wives do you have? Okay. You know, I grew up in the Middle East.
One too many.
We can have four. You know, you'll love this. I took a group to Timbuktu once, and we went into the mosque, and the imam was there giving a little tour, and the one American, and you know, there are Americans, and then there are Americans, right? This was an American, and he dropped the A. And the American said, "Isn't it true you guys can have 4 wives?" And the imam was just magnificent. He said, "Well, yes, it's true. And there's a lot to that, but yes, it's true. But it's also true in your culture. You just have them one at a time." So, you know, I mentioned he's got a lovely wife and 2 wonderful kids. And so that's part of the package of Robert Martinez. And the fun question is this: what are you working on now? Or what did you just work on that you really, really loved? Talissa.
So I am currently working on 3 commission pieces for the gallery that I signed with up in Whitefish, Montana. And the mural was actually really different and exciting for me. I mean, I've only worked on these a little. And so that was a drastic change. It's 20-foot buffalo, so. And the concept and process actually wasn't much different, and I didn't know that it was actually more impressive, I guess, that I still referred to go by my little image for my reference rather than the artist that I collabed with. She tried to make it easier since it was my first mural, and she got these squares and printed out, and she thought that would help me. But I actually preferred the little buffalo.
There's this great picture of Talissa. She's sitting up on one of the, what do you call those platforms, you know? Scaffolding. And the picture's taken from the back, you know, and she's got this tiny little picture of a bison, you know, and then she's enlarging it like a million times, you know, and I remember thinking, how in the world? Imagine what mine would look like, you know. So, Robert.
Well, my favorite pieces are always whatever I'm working on. So today I started a commission, a triptych for a private collector. The middle panel is 36 by 36, and the 2 side panels are 24 by 36. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so 7 by 3. It'll be. Just started that today, so that's currently my favorite.
Theme?
You know, the guy, he kind of likes hunting, so it's got a hunter with a bow in the middle panel, and then an elk and a buffalo on each side.
Yeah,
Bright colors. It's going to be yellow and red.
It's a great triptych in the Cody Museum, you know, Center for the West there. Can't miss if you go into the Plains Indians Museum there. You know. Thought I'd open it up for like 3 questions. Would that be okay? There's someone in the back who already raised his hand, then I'll come to you. Okay.
Well, this is going to be kind of meandering, but so as a local artist and a musician myself, I know that no amount of gigs I played in town was going to impress anybody in this area until we started playing gigs out of town. And then people from out of town saw that we had value. So I see what you're saying about how it's hard when you're from here and everybody else who's from here and they can't see the value to your art and you can't sell it to them. Like, it's awesome to see this project going on and getting you outside of the bounds of this area and then this state and then this country and that sort of thing. And hopefully that's it'll have the desired effect. I mean, if you look at the way Europeans epitomize the West and they romanticize it, it's not at all what it was or how it actually was, but they love it, you know, and they eat it up, that culture, and that because they're so far removed from it. But hopefully it'll bring it back to the point where you'll be valued here in your own home as well. I know that's not much of a question. My question is to you. That's just what I'm thinking. But my question is to you: how did you choose the elements in your giant mural that's awesome and on the side of that building?
So our overall theme was resilience, and so my fellow artist, her first thought was for the Arapaho. They believe that the buffalo, it represents resilience, and so she wanted me to incorporate that. And at first, she actually wanted me to do a traditional ledger style, which is just not me. But once we got it all planned out, she was really happy with what I came up with. And so the geometric designs on there are actually, there's ones that look like more lines. That's actually Chief Washki's worship. And so the idea behind that was victory. It was representing all his battles won. And in the mountains, those are Arapaho mountains and canyons, and I did trails. That just represents home, because what I was taught is that we go home to regain our strength.
When you say ledger style, do you mean the style of the buffalo or the background to the entire?
So they really wanted to kind of tie in what medium I use, and so you see that in there's a hummingbird, the eagle, a fish, and I'm not sure what the last one is. It's a bird. But they did the ledger.
We can see it right there.
Yeah.
On white.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So,
And
Oh,
the
yeah.
metal.
Oh, the metal.
Is there gonna be a little booklet or something
Yeah,
explaining
we're
this?
gonna have a plaque that
Well,
describes them.
but just something that like a tourist could pick up and take home with them.
Maybe at the Land
Oh,
Art
yeah.
Bake Shop this year.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
That's
yeah.
a good idea.
Yeah. And the fireweed actually ties hand in hand with the buffalo resilience. It's the first to bloom after a fire.
It's awesome.
By the way, Robert just finished a mural in Riverton, right?
Yes.
Yeah, some of you
Also
have
awesome.
seen that as well.
so good.
So,
Where is that located in Riverton?
The old high school hill on Main
Oh.
Street.
Tell them the 25-year story.
Yeah, I originally did that 25 years ago for free. That's what I should have said too.
Yeah,
I would just like to acknowledge how moving the exhibit is, especially when you take time to read the comments from the artist. And for me, it just made me feel, oh gosh, I don't know, the injustice that has happened to your peoples over time, and the way you're showing us that we can bring back the humility that was lost in all of that. That's not a question.
thank you.
So to me, that puts a positive spin on being a Native artist, is that you are telling such an important story.
Was raised on the Crow Creek Reservation. I've been around natives my whole life, and I have learned a whole bunch. But one thing that has just hits me time and time again is how the native culture deals with grief and celebrations. Nobody does it better. Okay, you guys know how to grieve and you guys know how to celebrate. And I was gonna wear I heard there was fry bread shirt tonight, but
We had great fry bread at the opening for the ground exhibit.
yeah, thank you. I missed that.
I'm sorry.
To me, that's one of the things, that's one of the themes that I think about when I think about Native art is each picture has at least one of those elements, if not both of those elements in the artwork. And to me, that just is the most powerful thing you all gotta give. I don't know, I was wondering what you see your own culture, what, I mean, you talked about some more tangible sorts of things to teach people, but spiritually, that's what I always seem to like, wow.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So sorry.
We're probably 15 or 20 gigawatts of renewable wind and solar away from decarbonizing just the Western grid. And so I'm wondering, and I appreciate the title Grounded, because I feel like we should all be grounded until we find the sacred harmony. And I'm curious how you find hope to bring forward this prompt for serious conversations about a crisis in our lifetimes.
How do I find hope?
Thank you.
Are you Martin Armeo? Is this your daughter who's artist? Right there.
Yeah.
She's done our work at the Capitol. She'll come here. She sees that we can do this. She's gonna do that. Hopefully she'll bring this on to other people so we can, spread the message, of Native art, or tell our own stories. That's what gives me hope, is younger artists, emerging artists.
Sweet.
Melissa, would you like to answer that too?
I have a question if we're still
Yeah,
time
that's
for
it.
questions.
Let me just right.
Oh.
I'd like Talissa to have her turn to answer his question there.
So I would just, the ripple effect, basically. I mean, I don't know too many artists, but once you start that going, I'm really excited because we all have our own messages and they're all important. And so I'm excited to see where this all goes and how many people are touched and where their ideas, because I love science too. I love the science aspect and everything about what we can do for our Mother Earth. And so I'm just excited to see how many lives we touch.
I think, in following up your question and their answers too, is that the exhibition kind of touches on two very sensitive topics related to the environment in our world and what does it mean for us to be one with it and all that, right? Can kind of be sensitive in our own state, right, as well. And it also touches on what's happened in many ways, with our Native American sisters and brothers, right? And I appreciate Mary talking about just being moved by that, and very, very much so. My experience is that the arts serve as one of the most effective ways to address those themes. So when I think of, I forget, what's your name, the younger artist here? Jordan? Okay, Jordan, yeah. I mean, and the idea of using that skill and that gift that you've got for the future to really address issues that we all need as well to benefit from. And one of the things about the arts is that it hits a sensitive topic indirectly. It's like addressing it under the table a little bit. So often those defensive walls don't naturally go up, and it can really speak and communicate, And so anyway, we'll close with the director of the Lander Art Center.
Okay.
The one who started will close us.
That sounds great. Well, I have kind of a two-part question, but more, I would just love to hear your thoughts on this. Being in an art space dominated by whiteness and the white gaze, and being artists who end up getting grouped into the Native artist kind of box and like creating art that's incredibly vulnerable and very raw and powerful, and it carries so much history and meaning. So the two parts to it are, have you been on a journey to decolonize your art and your artistry? And if so, what has that looked like for you? And then the second part of that is, I would love to hear a little bit, if you feel comfortable sharing, about like what is evoked for you knowing that so much of your art is in proximity to whiteness and consumed by the white gaze, and just how that feels as someone who is really bearing their soul artistically. And so whatever you feel comfortable answering, however you would like to, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Robert, then Talissa.
Will you go first? Well, I think I talked a little bit about how I think, well, first let's talk about language real quick, because terms like decolonization and stuff have come up recently, and just recently, so I think that's going to evolve into another term. So we always got to catch up on our terms, whatever those might be, so that we always understand what we're talking about. But that term decolonization is one that you hear a lot. And I don't know that I do that, but in my artwork, I do point out stereotypical and ways of thinking that people have about not only Native people, but the West in general. Those romanticized ideals that we see on TV over and over again. And you know what? I'm guilty of watching them. I watch Yellowstone too. I'm in it for all the drama, but you know what? Why are the Indians the bad guys again? It's that type of thing. So it always comes up, but as long as we know that, we can enjoy it in good fun. But when people are coming to places with Indigenous people, like let's say the Northwest, they say, well, where are your teepees at? Well, they don't have teepees, right? If they're going down to the Southwest and they see Pueblos, and they go, oh, we didn't know you lived in buildings like that. So, well, taking those stereotypes and adjusting them and educating people is a lot of what I do as an artist. And it's usually in small groups like this or one-on-one in front of one of my art pieces to explain exactly what it means. So I think nowadays being a Native artist includes being an educator. Mm-hmm. And the second part, in such a, being in a, I guess, what did you say, a white
dominated field.
Well, I don't know anything else. That's the long and short of it. But I tell you what does feel good, nice paycheck from a big piece.
From a white person.
Yeah. And, that's a great feeling, because it validates you. Hey, somebody wanted this enough to buy this, especially if it's huge. Mm-hmm. But it also makes me think of the other side of the coin is that there's not many Native people that could afford what we do. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason I have to go outside of Wyoming to sell my work. I can't even afford my own work. That's the long and short of it. That's the real thing. What we create is an item that has a certain amount of time and effort into it, and to be to be compensated adequately for that takes money. So that's the realistic way of looking at it. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of brown people with a lot of money. But that's an opportunity for us to tell our own stories and to adjust expectations, to revise those stereotypes. So it's a give and take.
Thank you. Want to say anything on that front?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily focus on decolonization. I just love what I do.
Mm.
And I mean, that's what I live for. It's my heart and soul, and that's all I'm trying to like think of is just to be able to maintain that lifestyle so that I can have those moments of fulfillment. And also with the other question, yeah, I don't pay much attention. I'm all about the love and peace.
Thank you. I did promise one other person a question. I forgot about her, so, yes, sorry. That will be our last
Well,
question.
this kind of pertains to what you were just talking about. I was.
You're breaking your mind.
That was the most expensive piece.
A few years ago, I was working with a family at Arapaho, taking photographs of them and things. And it came to, they all of a sudden discovered that a few years before, one of the young men in the family had been photographed by an artist from Cody. And he'd also photographed a lot of other people on the reservation. And so it came to the family's knowledge while I was working with them that the painting of this young man was like selling for like $500,000 in the gallery.
Wow.
And yeah.
Yeah, love a picture.
I'm trying to reconcile this. It's like, what manner of exploitation is this? Here are these folks, wonderful folks, they're living in their little simple trailer in Arapaho, getting by, if they're lucky, month to month. And some guy had paid this kid $200 to pose for him when he was like 18 or 19 years old, and now he's got, a $500,000 painting for sale. I mean, it's like, please, can you explain that? Or
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Because our powwow attire or traditional attire is aesthetically pleasing, we get used on everything from butter to cars, right? That's not, it's not right. You don't do that with anybody else, but it's okay to do that with natives, and it's still okay, Indian motorcycles still out there, They just took the native woman off of the Land O'Lakes butter, but they kept the land.
And the lakes.
I think it's just further educating, especially Native people, on their rights for their likeness, and especially for their intellectual property. Native artists get taken advantage of all the time. It's something that I've helped combat in the past with a few other artists that I know. I've dealt with it myself. Artists in general get taken advantage of. I watched the Elvis movie lately, and thinking about the Johnny Cash movie, the Ray movie, and talking to other artists. I don't think there's an artist out there that hasn't been taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And I think we're easy marks because we're putting our message out there on something that we want you to see, we want you to hear, we want you to taste, whatever it is that we do creatively. And they say, hey, we can make some money off of this, but we're not going to give you any. Fashion has happened. Fashion designer, native fashion designers, by some really high-name fashion companies. It happens a lot, and not enough of us are aware of what we can do or our rights, or what it always comes down to in the American legal system, who's got the best lawyer, right? We can't afford that type of class action that maybe like Disney can or something like that. So it's a problem.
It really is class action, isn't it?
Did you see 1883?
I did. They had me until the blonde girl was running around without a shirt and everybody else had a coat on.
Yeah.
Drove me nuts. I know she was wearing all the native stuff too. That wasn't. I've seen that before. I see that in Santa Fe all the time.
Too, when that one guy pointed with his lips.
Yeah. One of the actors from that last episode is in the exhibit. Ben Pease was in the last episode of that.
Sweet.
We didn't hear the question.
Oh, she just commented on the TV show.
The prequel to Yellowstone,
Oh, okay.
1883. And Ben is in the film?
Ben's in the last episode. Yeah.
He is?
Mhm.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to watch that again. I don't know about you, but I always feel, and by the way, artists are my heroes, but when they open their hearts up, share their inspiration, and especially when they get vulnerable, allow us in, I always feel I'm kind of sitting or standing on sacred ground. And I think tonight was that, very much so. So on behalf of all of us, we're really honored to have you both here, very much so. Thank you.